You should be good.
Oh, bye, pet.
Oh, did Pet just leave?
Yep.
Oh, well, I guess you can teach it for the recording if you want.
Sure. Yeah, I can do that.
This is Crafting with Leather by Cien Fuegos. We're gonna make something cool.
All right. So yeah, we will make something cool. What we're going to make is just like a sword frog. There's something to hold your weapon on your belt. It's an easy pattern, easy thing to do. We're going to use this much leather for it. It is about a 10 or so ounce leather, so fairly thick. You want that for your strap because it's going to get some abuse. It's going to be on your belt. The back strap is going to take some abuse, and so you want to make sure that it's there. We're going to use this. We're going to put a snap on it, and we are going to put it together with screw posts or Chicago screws. They're the thing that I like about Chicago screws. You could put it together with rivets as well. But rivets tend to break more often and often not hold up when it's something that is abused a little bit more. The nice thing about the screw post as well is if you need to take it apart, you can take it back apart, and it's not a hard thing to put back, take apart, put back together, replace a strap, replace something like that. So it works out well, and they are much stronger than rivets. So first thing we're going to do is figure out a pattern. This is something the way that I usually do things. I like to use graph paper because then you don't have to measure and think too hard about it. I usually map it out to be okay. Hey, here's the middle. Here's where we are. You can then fold it in half. I mark on it beforehand where we're going to put our pass-through for the strap, and where we're going to put some rivets. Right in this area is generally where we're going to put our screw posts in the middle to hold this strap in place and keep it from moving back and forth or sliding out or anything else. So just a few markings on this so that we can mark and let the leather know what we want it to do. It may or may not do what we ask it to, but it will. You can fold it in half. The nice thing about cutting this way, just like a snowflake, is you get to make it nice and symmetrical without. It's fairly forgiving to put it on the leather, and nobody's out there with calipers afterwards to see, hey, you know, this is off just a little tiny bit. But this way you get your curves mostly the same. And things look good. So you pop it out, and then you have a very nice symmetrical pattern. Why I haven't put this into some kind of acrylic or even a piece of cardboard yet, I don't know. But as soon as I do, somebody will want something different than this. So I will have kind of wasted that time for it. What you want to do then is put that pattern on the leather so we can cut it out in that shape. You want to take a little bit of water and spray it down just a little bit so that it's a little bit damp. I should have done that before we cut. Just get a little bit of dampness on it so that it will take our impression a little bit better. And there's two ways you can do this. You can either take a pen, just a marker or otherwise, and this is something you'd never ever do with cloth, but you can just say, all right, I'm just going to draw right on here where I want this to be, where I'm going to cut this out. I'm going to draw right along, trace that right where I need or want it to be. Just in pen. Anybody who works with cloth is dying right now. It's what you're
atrocity.
The atrocity of just doing this. But with the leather, you'll never do it. It'll never really make a difference. And I will show you why. Then we want to take the stylus, and we're going to put an X. This is kind of one of the neat things of leather. We're going to put an X here, so we don't need to measure afterwards. I'm going to say, all right, here is a round here, a round end, and a round end, a round end, and a round end, and then draw right through here. You can also use just a pen that's all worn out, no more ink left in it, if you don't want to go out and buy a stylus. This comes with a modeling tool that's handy in a lot of ways. And if we come here and say, all right, hey, here's the center, this is probably going to be our center spot for that. So we haven't written on the paper because we've used a pen with no ink in it, or the ball stylus, or otherwise, but when we take the pattern away, everything is right there. Because when you have the leather damp, it's impressionable. With that, if you really get close, it's a little tiny impression that goes through there. And so that works really, really well. What we want to do then is take our nice sharp knife. You want to make sure that it is sharp. This is the strop. And before you cut, leather is terrible on your blades, just like foam is, or just like, fabric is bad for your blades. That's why you always want to make sure that you're sharp. There, the sharper it can be. Can we see this okay?
Yes.
Okay, sharper it is, the better off we are. You don't need to make your entire pass in one cut. This is sharp enough that I think it almost, yeah, it did. It did make it in one cut, but you can just run through it that way. If it is super thick leather and you're nervous about it, especially on curves, you can run it a couple of times, run a few cuts, and it just takes a little tiny bite each time that you run. Follow your curve, and you can see I'm not actually being really super exact with how that is turning out, because this isn't going to be the finished edge. We're getting this cut where it's going to be, but it's going to have a little further work done to the edge. This knife is like sweet sharp. So we're all done with that. We've got that cut out. None of these things are bigger than my hand, so they get thrown away. Best situation for your shop in all the land. And there are a few options of what you can do with the edge. You can take a wing divider and say, hey, we're going to go ahead and scratch an edge all the way around this and follow that line to give it a little bit of a detail. A little bit there. You'll notice I'm leaving it from the edges a little bit because we want to make sure it's uniform, because once you do this, it does tend to stay there because you're actually scratching the leather. So that way you can get it in line, take your time and run around it 2 times that way, so that you bring things together. And this is actually just a guide anyway, so as we go, we just want to make sure that we're meeting in the spot that lets us have a look. And now as we look at it, it's actually being a little more detailed, a little bit happier, even as we just that much. Now that you can punch some holes, slap it on your belt, and everything's happy, but it's going to wear out. You're going to have some fraying, as we talked about in the last class. We do want to take care of the edges, and now this is where the magic happens, and we don't have to worry about that blue marker line. And see, that blue marker line is all gone, as is its friend up here in the north, and this friend over here, and this friend here. We're also dyeing this black. That's what everybody wants. Everything is black. So we've taken that off, and for the most part, we've got most of that blue off. If it is going to be a lighter color, I would probably, rather than using the marker, I wanted to make sure I showed that so that you can see, hey, sometimes it doesn't really matter. But you can actually just use the stylus and get that taken care of. We'll want to clean up the back as well. Sometimes the fleshy side doesn't like to cut as well. Every tool that you have, you can probably strop as you go. And with this type of tool, you're going to go backwards and just run that. And we'll see the difference here in a second, how much trouble it had there before versus how nicely it goes through it the second time. So that strop is really your friend. And so we've got these edges cleaned up a little bit so they have a little bit of roundness to them, and they're not going to fray or give you any problems or anything else. This is one that I made some time ago. It's starting to fray a little bit, but I have worn this to every practice I've been to for a year and a half, 2 years. So that edge treatment, and I probably did this really fast and impatiently, but that edge treatment really helps that to not fray and give you problems. There as it goes. So that, again, we can punch some holes in it, off we go, we look really good for what it is. Certainly. Now we want to cut some holes in the middle of it, and easy way to do that is with our biggest hole punch and the rotary punch. We should be able to reach, and we can. And you can punch the very end of that hole. Into that hole. And you can buy an oblong punch. I like to help people do things on a budget. You can buy an oblong punch that's going to give you that oval shape. Use them a lot for belts, other things that way. I usually run them this way and just use my hole punch and a knife blade. One trick is to not pull all the way through. Just go 3/4 of the way to that next spot. Because if you go all the way through and you pull past, you're going to cut into the bottom just below this. You'd still never be able to see it because it's going to be under. This is probably actually going to be, might be visible. It's going to be under a strap and not much to give you a problem with, but it's still nice to not have that little cut in the leather, especially if you're making it for someone else. To do that. So there we have those. Next, we want to take a look at the screw post that we're going to use. And we'll use this size. So I think that is going to be thick enough to get through. So if you look at it, we want to be thick enough to get through 2 pieces of leather. So that's what's usually going to be there, and that is just right to go that way. So we're actually going to end up using 3 of these. One tip I will give everyone, always, get a place to store your stuff like this. This is just a fishing tackle box. Get the ones out that you need. Then do this. You close the box and snap that lid shut. Because if you don't, and you just have it open there because, hey, I'm putting a lot of rivets in, or I'm doing a lot of things, you're going to spill it. And if you have 3 or 4 different kinds of things, it's going to be a bad day, a really, really bad day. So if you can avoid spilling your rivets all over the place, you're good. So you want to take the outside screw post and check it with your size. Make sure that, hey, that's going to be the same size, what we want. We're going to pop one in right here and see if we can reach here, and we can't. So that's a bummer. So we're going to have to go to the good old manual. You can use a drill for this as well. And it works really well if you've got good backing to it. But these little guys are inexpensive and give you all of the punches you need. Run it there, and always always a poly mallet or something that's not going to be mean to your stuff on the other side. And the one thing I don't like about this type of punch versus the rotary punch is it does tend to make a hole that is that's conical. It's not gonna give you a really pretty straight hole. So the backs of the holes are the same as, but not quite the front. But the leather does go back into position and make itself right over time. You always want to punch into something that's going to be good, not into anything hard. Certainly not your general work surface, because it's also hard on the tips for that. We're going to dress this guy up just a little bit as well. So we're going to give it a little more water. Let that soak in just a little bit. It makes it cut just a little better and makes those fibers be happier when they get cut and moved to be better. You can see that even that scratch we're almost erasing. Water will erase a lot of things that you scratch or do otherwise to some extent on the top. There are a few different ways you could do this. We're going to use the swivel knife, but you could also just use the scratch awl and just make just your wing divider and just scratch it in there deeper. You can also use a stitching groover. The stitching groover will put a groove in the leather at a certain distance that happens to be that exact same distance. Put a groove in the leather along the edge that you can actually hide a stitch in. So it puts just a little tiny thin shallow groove that as you stitch along that way and have your stitches running in this way, it keeps the stitch basically the same height as the top of the leather, keeps your stitches from getting snagged and run out. Plus you make really neat leather thread that is not strong at all. But that's a stitching groover. These are about $10. They're fun to use if you're doing a lot of stitching, a lot of hand stitching. They're really nice. It also gives you a nice straight line to work with otherwise. If you're saying, hey, I need to know where I'm going to put my stitches, where I'm going to put my holes or anything else, that works really well. We are going to run a little bit with this. Are we on time? All right. So again, we're going to strap. When we're strapping, it's just polishing. Set that up. And when you cut with a swivel knife, there was a question earlier worrying about, hey, cutting with that swivel knife, do you cut all the way through? And he was worried about cutting all the way through. And you really don't. In fact, on the example that we had, I picked up the swivel knife just to show him and said, I'm going to push as hard as I can on this, and did. I pushed really hard, and I got about 2/3 of the way through. I think if I'd made 2 passes with it, or maybe 3, then I would have cut through the leather. But it's designed to run out just because of the geometry. It's a very wide triangle, so it's going to cut a hole, and that's what you want. You want that big wide triangle to be able to show, okay, we have something different. Now, at this point in time, if you're doing something like this and you're carving and things, we could choose to bevel this and say we're going to push this side down to make this look like it was further in and the outside look like it was taller. Or we could push the outside in and make the outside look like it was taller and like the inset was bigger. We could even make a third line in here and make it stand out above both the others. All those things are possibilities. There's no end to what you can really do, other than, okay, hey, you just can't quite make it, super three-dimensional. In fact, actually you can. There are guys that do leather carving. It's on thinner leather usually, and you push it out from behind, and it makes a three-dimensional image that's really pretty cool to run that way. We're going to put a little more water on it because if we're going to bevel, we want it to be a little bit happier. So I'm going to go with a textured beveler. Put a little texture on this, and that make it fairly interesting. This is where you need something heavy behind it to do. It's always best to keep your desk much cleaner than this, and you'll be much happier with what you're doing. But so you can see, I'm just going to hold the beveler, kind of control it with fingers, and put it in place this way. And we're going to put quite a few hits to it, and as we move it, we're not moving it very far at all. So you're getting some compression all the way across. If you move it the entire length and say, okay, hey, I'm going to put 6 or 7 of these across, you'll get a lot of in-between marks. And you can see that runs down a little bit. You've got a little bit of a lip. This stands up. That gets down. And that works out well. Again, try to see if I can make this so y'all can see it. This is what my house sounds like in the evenings at night. My family sleeps through this really well because I'm a kind of a nighttime craftsman. So I work on things from 10 to 12, sometimes 1. We had nieces staying with us the other night. My son was like, well, Dad, you probably shouldn't do any other work tonight. Because they're not used to sleeping through the sound. Any questions while I'm just beveling along?
Do you do any edge finishing on like the holes that you cut out?
The holes, we will, yes. In fact, I would have looked at it and said, hey, I need to bevel just for the same reason, especially where you're going to have a strap moving through it. We want to have those be as finished as we can. They don't need to be fantastic because the strap doesn't slide back and forth through it, but it does have a little bit of friction up and down and things. We want it to look nice in here, so we will do that in moments from now. I will be done, finished, as my 4th grade teacher would remind me. With that. So now we can see there's a little bit of burnishing happening, which means we're pushing just right on that bevel. It's turning dark. It's giving us a little bit of a burnish there as we go. I'm not sure where that came from. Who knows? Okay, that does come there. We will take our edge beveler and actually run a little bit in each of these, which cleans up where we didn't quite get to the lines. That takes that little bite out of it. And we can burnish this a little bit just with one of these. I've probably used it more in my hand than I have in my Dremel. That was ugly. Just to give us a little rounded bit there. We can do that. Our strap, we need to do some of the same finishing on, but we're going to slip this through. Like this. And pull it to where we're going to want that. And pull the strap across. Leather's great. You can ride on it with anything. And you can get end punches. As we've said before, you can spend a lot of money on a lot of tools. You can get end punches, but you can usually cut a pretty nice round end with just a whole bunch of little tiny straight cuts. Just cutting that down. That's not absolutely perfect, but we'll play with it here in a minute. And again, we're going to cut some edge off of it. We're going to burnish the edge and get that done that way. So we've got those two pieces. We'll need a little piece on the back to keep it on a belt. So I usually go to this hole and I'll push up a little bit because we've got to have this other piece of leather behind it and a little bit of room for a belt. So we usually try to make sure we've got a pretty decent amount of material there as it is. Cut that. So we run that, and I do like to keep it. This is going to be back behind everything else. We want to make sure it's going to survive and look good as well. So now here we need a hole on this side. The top one we can do wherever. Just make it far enough in that we're happy. And the bottom one I usually just do toward the bottom, and that's going to make our bulge bunch up enough. That's way too much. Make that bulge come up enough for what we need. The mark must have moved when I cut that out. Sneaky marks. That should be enough to get that done. Run this through. Punch a hole in the middle of that. This comes up, so we'd have a screw post here on the back side of it. As we assemble like this, that's one really nice thing about screw posts is they do let you kind of dry fit really easily. Say, all right, is this where we want this? Is this as long as we want it? Does this work, or do we need to do something different? It also gives it a little flexibility. When you're finished, you should usually put a little drop of blue Loctite in there. Don't use the red. Blue Loctite is plenty. That'll just keep that screw from ever working its way out, just in general life and motion and everything else. The back side will come together in about the same way. Any other questions, or we're just fitting? Sometimes I don't talk and think at the same time as well. So that post doesn't fit as well as I'd like it to. So we just pushed a little bit further with the punch and made it fit quite a bit better. Stretch the leather a little bit. This leather will shrink up a little bit. So here is our sword frog, a lot of the way done. Gives us a little bit of room for a belt, however thick, however big. Plenty of room back there. Now all we need to do is put a snap on and dye it and finish it as we go. So any questions so far?
mostly just enjoying. It's very relaxing.
Well, good. It's always fun to put it together and then take it apart. If I'd been more prepared, see, last year I was all prepared with like different pieces. So we made a shoulder last year, and it was a 3-piece shoulder, so I could have a different amount done to each piece, so there was less going.
I also like this small little project because it's like I could do that.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I can do this in a day. I can do this in not even in a day. And besides letting dye dry, we're gonna be there really pretty good in very short amount of time. If you have the weapon, it really helps. Different handle thicknesses come in to be. I like to get it as tight as you can in a smaller part of the handle, so that it's going to hold. If we ever needed to change it, put a new strap on because they got a bigger, thicker weapon, anything like that, that works. And so I have a stylus. It's kind of a meme. I spend most of my time looking for the tool I had a minute ago. So we're gonna punch one hole. We only mark one half of the snap. And snaps are fun. Snaps are pretty easy to set. They come in 4 parts. You've got the outside of the snap, which is the buttony, nice domed part. You've got the flat part of the snap, which is the back side. And you have the 2 pieces, kind of the male and female piece of the snap, one with a little ring in it, and one that is the snap-in part. They can be, to some extent, tricky to set, especially this one. This one is probably the one that I've torn off and thrown away the most, is this little one with the ring, because you want to make sure that you get this little nipple or this little nipple bent over the right amount. With thinner stuff, it gets really hard because there's so much material there to get out of the way. With thicker stuff, we're usually pretty good, and sometimes we need more material to be there, and you can use a bigger snap, bigger, thicker snaps. If you're looking to put snaps on anything or rivets on anything, you can buy the rapid rivets or the easy snaps. These are line 20 and line 24 snaps, all from Tandy Leather, or you can get them from most leatherworking places. We'll have them. They're all basically the same, but they usually come with a little setting tool and an anvil, so that you can get them set and taken care of. And they usually have 2 parts to them. One part is going to be for setting the little nipple parts inside, and the other part is going to be kind of the same with just a little less space on the outside. So we usually have an anvil like this. It's just concave. They also come like this, and they will usually have one that you can set things into to hold them in place. So depending on what it is that you've got, what you purchased, you'll have different anvils that'll help you in different setters. That help. If you want something heavy again, you can use your marble as you go. And we got to pick up the right strap. It's always helpful to have the piece, because I was just going to put a snap in the back piece, and that wouldn't be as helpful. So what we're going to do first is punch the right size hole, and it is a different sized hole than we have for the others. You can see, all right, hey, it's going to run down just a little bit. Is it this one or that one? I'm going to use this one. And snap that back through. And these little things get all over your shop. If you punch a lot of holes, you get a bunch of these little things because they go everywhere. They'll pop out and fly around and do all kinds of things. And tough to clean up. Vacuums don't like them very well. So we're going to put this back in place. Make sure it's back where it needs to be. This is going to be snap coming over top. We're going to grab the weapon again, put it in place. You always want to measure twice, cut once, measure twice, set the root once. It's going to be best if that's where we think that's going to be. Can pop a spot in there, and that marks leather, which is one of the cooler properties of leather. Right there, and we can pop a hole in it right like that. I like to have as little to deal with as I can when I'm setting just about anything. If I'm having to deal with a whole big thing, then you can deal with a whole big thing. But if you can deal with just the small, we can deal with just the small a little bit better. So this is going to be the back side. We're going to pop this little guy in through the hole and push down. You want to push the back in and kind of push down with your nails and make sure that it's seated in there as far as it can. That's super helpful as you put things on. And we get this in here, and so your little nipple sticks through and runs there. We just want to put it in place. Hold it in place, and these always turn out super nice. This side, because it works really well. It folds that right down, folds the little nipple down around, and now they're theoretically, I mean, technically riveted together there for that. On the other side, I always look at it and make sure we're doing the right way, because it sucks when you have the snap coming this way. It doesn't work as well. So we put the snap on the one side. Same thing, you want to make it get nice and set down there for it. Set this in, and this is where you want to have your little dished rivet, because we don't want to crush this dome. We can do it right on the marble, but you'll crush that dome. So if you can put it in a dish so that it's supported, you'll be in better shape. Your other little anvil or your other little setter works, and I've never loved the way these work, but you can hold on to it and just hope you've plugged it in the right way, and we're not too bad in there. We didn't deform. What you don't want to do is deform this ring, deform the outside of the snap, and you don't want to have something in the way. So after I do that, I usually grab the other little anvil that seems to be almost the better guy for it, and tap it down a little more. So then we've got the snap. The snap does exactly what it says as advertised. It snaps, and off we go. So we've got all of our hardware ready to go. The next thing that you'd want to do, and we're not going to have time to do it, is dye. And as we dye, we're going to want to finish our edges. The edge is the first thing that I will usually put dye on. You put the dye on it, get it damp a little bit, put some neat's foot oil on it. Will help it last a lot longer, keep it from drying out. So neat's foot oil, and water, actually, a little bit of oil and water together. Put your neat's foot oil on, and then put some dye on the edge, and take your edge slicker and run that dye into the edge. Before you're dyeing any of the rest, run that dye into the edge. and get that taken care of, get that pushed in and get that nice and slick as you go. Same thing with all the edges here and our edges in here that we kind of slicked a minute ago. We'll finish slicking those in, and that's going to get rid of all the little extra fibers that are floating off and around here. That will make things quite a bit better for it as it goes. And then after the dye, you can put on a finish coat, or you can put on some antique gel. There, I use the dye that I use actually all the time is the EcoFlow water stain. Is that backwards? You can't tell. EcoFlow water stain. The cool thing is it's all water cleanup. You don't have the oil base on it, so it is water cleanup. It goes on just as well. Everything I've ever done, the dye has worked really well. They have some cool colors. They have gold, they have silver, they have a mother of pearl. The mother of pearl is an additive, so you can make this like a pearl black or a pearl green. They've got purple, which is a tough a tough color to dye. They've got purple, they've got reds, all kinds of different things in the water stain. And then the antique gel is something that a lot of people think, well, I don't want it antiqued. You want the antique gel. The antique gel, what it does is if this is dyed, it's dyed and it's what it is. It'll all be black. But when you put the antique gel on it, it gets down in all the little tiny grooves and bits and finishes filling in what it is. They have these in several different colors so that you can, match whatever your project is, light or dark, reds or browns or blues. And you can get that in all these little nooks and crannies. And so it makes part of it look a little darker and part of it look newer. So you have some difference in texture and some depth of color that's there. Then they also have a finishing product that would go on top of all of that, Super Sheen. That gives it a little bit of waterproofing, as well as some coverage to keep your dye from coming out. This is a resist, so if you're ever trying to dye two different colors, you can use this as a resist. I don't think resists work, so because I've never had very good luck with them. But that's that. You can get that in the super shiny. They also have a matte or satin finish on those, and that works. Are there any questions? So we can, as we wrap up here.
No, I don't think so. But that was very lovely. Thank you.
You are welcome. I'm
That
sorry
was-
we had no peoples.
That's all good. I mean, we were here. I enjoyed it.
Oh, good.
I'm
Like
still